Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another palette week video. I am filming in advance, so I'm not exactly sure the order that these videos are going to go up, but we are in the midst of palette week, meaning every day for 7 days I am posting some sort of palette related content, and I'm very excited because today I'm going to be doing an updated if I had to declutter one eyeshadow palette tag. So I think I've done this 2 years now. I believe I was originally inspired to do this from Julia Musicato, who is no longer on YouTube, but I know Betty Jean, I believe, just recently did this video and it's kind of circulating around, and I wanted to do an updated version because I've accumulated so many palettes into my collection and I always have fun filming this one. Of course, it's all in good fun. I'm not actually decluttering these eyeshadow palettes, but I went through my entire collection, and any makeup brand that I owned more than one eyeshadow palette from, I selected the palette from that brand that I would declutter if I had to declutter one. So I'll leave my palette playlist link down below if you're interested in catching any more palette themed content, as well as my previous years that I've done this video. I would love to know your guys' response to what brands do you own more than one palette from, and what palettes would you be decluttering if you had to declutter one. So if you're interested in seeing the palettes I would declutter if I had to declutter one, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like palette themed content, project panning content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, I would love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. Okay, naturally this always happens. I like clean my apartment and then I film a video where I pull like half of my makeup collection out. Also, before we begin, I am trying to get use out of one of the lipsticks in my whole collection project pan, but I do not feel like it necessarily matches the outfit, and I was too lazy to change my shirt to like make it match more, so there's that. But I'm gonna go in no particular order other than I have so many palettes laid out in front of me, so I'm just gonna grab for them as like they're easiest to grab for. So up first, we have Huda Beauty, and I own so many palettes from Huda Beauty. If you guys are longtime subscribers, you know I love Huda Beauty. I think her eyeshadow formula is pretty hit and miss, but I'm always excited to try it anyway. Like if it's a miss, it's a miss, and you know, sorry for that, but I do love to try Huda Beauty's palettes. And this is definitely one I feel like that has changed, but as I was looking over everything, truly if I had to declutter one right now, I would have to go with the Coral Obsessions palette. And this used to be like, I have so many fond memories tied to so many different palettes, but like this was my travel companion palette. Like this went traveling with me all of the time. In 2019, I feel like I traveled pretty frequently, and this was always with me. Always with me. I do have a pan in this eyeshadow palette right now, and I'm actually currently working on another pan in my Pan Those Eyeshadow series, so hoping to have another pan in this palette soon. But if I had to declutter one of my Huda eyeshadow palettes at this very moment in time, I'd be sad, but it would be the Huda Coral Obsessions. Next up for Natasha Denona, obviously I wasn't gonna go with one of my larger Natasha Denona palettes, none of my midi palettes. I went with a 5-pan, but truly this was such a disappointment of a palette in my opinion, so I would declutter the the Natasha Denona Mini Crush if I had to declutter one of my Natasha Denona palettes. I was so excited for this one. I don't know if it was just that it released in February and I was feeling the pinks and purples, or I was just excited for another Huda Beauty 5-pan palette. But really the only shades that I like in this are these two right here. I do like this matte sort of like taupey pink shade, and I like this pink shimmer. The red shimmer is okay, I just don't reach for shimmers like, or in the shade all that frequently. But I was really disappointed specifically in the quality of these two matte shades, and it's just not a favorite everyday color story for me. So because the formula didn't wow me, this would have to be the palette that I would select to declutter if I had to declutter one from Natasha. Next up I have Alien Cosmetics, and I can't remember, I know that they've rebranded and they're no longer Alien Cosmetics, they have a different name. I only have 2 eyeshadow palettes from them, and I purchased both of them around September or October last year. I am interested, as I was pulling these palettes out, I was like, I feel like every single month one of my 3 eyeshadow palettes that I purchased should be from, like, at least minimum one should be from an indie brand, because I do want to try more indie eyeshadow, and this is a tangent that we don't need to be on. Anyway, the one that I chose from Alien Cosmetics, again, I'm not sure the name of their what they rebranded to, but I chose the Hauntingly Glamorous palette. The other palette I own from them is the Not Normal palette, and first of all, I love the packaging of both palettes, but the Not Normal is so freaking cute. And then the color story in this one is just one that I would reach for less frequently than my Not Normal palette. The Not Normal palette has a couple neutrals mixed in, whereas this one really is a lot more colorful. You have your reds here, which just are not shades that I reach for that often. But for some reason, when this released, I just felt like I had to have this palette. I think it was mostly for this like lilac purple shade and the shimmers, which I do enjoy. And I'm excited to eventually pull this one back out this year and play around with this a little bit more. And again, I'm excited to hopefully purchase from more indie brands this year. If you guys have indie brand eyeshadow formula recommendations, like your favorite indie eyeshadow brands, leave them down below. I know I personally have Adept Cosmetics singles, but I don't have any of their palettes, and I've been eyeing them for like over a year at this point in time, so I feel like I need to do that at some point. But getting off topic again, the palette I would declutter from Alien Cosmetics is the Hauntingly Glamorous. Next up, I have Lunar Beauty, and this one was really tough because I truly do like all of my Lunar Beauty palettes, but ultimately I landed on the Moonspell palette. The reason being, I just would get the least use out of this color story, although this is probably the most unique of the three color stories. I just could not part with the, what is it? The Lunar Eclipse, and then the, what is the other one? The Greek Goddess. Although I love the purples in here, and you do have some neutrals in here as well. I just felt like I would get the least use out of this palette, or this palette has gotten the least use in my collection of the three. So that is why I decided if I had to declutter one from Lunar Beauty, it would be the Moonspell palette. But packaging on this one is probably my favorite of the three. It's getting towards the end of the day. The sun's going down. Does it look like, do I look like I'm in a sunset? I feel like I kind of do in my viewfinder, but I don't know how it'll come across on camera. I just took a sip of my energy drink and it like ran down my face because I naturally just am so aggressive in everything that I do, including how I drink my energy drinks. So if you're noticing, like if I have a drip mark, if it looks like I'm like a vampire who just like sucked blood from her prey. Why am I so weird? Like, why are we talking about this in an eyeshadow palette video? I feel like I need to also reapply my lipstick. Be right back. Okay, I'm back and reapplied my lipstick. Can you guys tell I like have been by myself literally all day, not talked to a soul, and like not left my apartment either, because we're getting weird. It's getting to be almost 6 p.m. and we're getting a little bit weird. Moving on to Colourpop, a lot of these choices from you guys were actually really easy. Like, it wasn't like I was like, let me open every palette and look through. Colourpop was no exception to that. So if I had to declutter one of my Colourpop palettes, it would be the On Cloud Blue. The reason for this is just like I don't reach for these blue shadows that often, especially to create like a whole look. This would definitely be like a companion palette. It would probably be like a neutral with a pop of blue that I'm thinking of. So if this exited my collection, I truly don't feel like I would miss it that much. So this is the one I would go with for Colourpop. BH Cosmetics is next, and this was going to be a difficult choice, but then I remembered I have like a few palettes set aside that I like think I'm almost 100% certain I'm going to declutter, and one of them was the BH Cosmetics Lunar New Year palette. I purchased this for in 2021. It was really just an impulse purchase. I should not have purchased this. I did not need this. And the only reason that I'm really keeping this in my collection is just because for some reason this pop of like neon is getting to me, even though I never reach for that shade. Next eyeshadow palette declutter, I should really declutter this because I just do not need this in my collection anymore. And I really wish I had purchased like 1 or 2 of the Sweet Shop palettes over this. Next up we have Lawless, and this was a tough one because I only own 2 palettes from Lawless and I really love both of them, but if I had to declutter one, I went with the baby one. Reason being, the glam one is just more my like everyday vibe for a color story, and that one offers like a mauve row as well as like a brown smoky eye row, whereas this is really just mauves. So I felt like the other one offered me a little bit more variety, but I still love both of these, and I really don't think you can go wrong with the Lawless mini eyeshadow palettes. I wasn't a big fan of the larger palette, but these little 8 pans for 25 bucks I love. But if I had to choose between the 2, I would declutter the baby one. From Sigma Beauty, this was a difficult one because I do really enjoy this palette. I love the color story, but I just love the other 2 I have more than I love this one. So I went with Sigma Untamed over Sigma Corderosa and Sigma Enchanted. This is what the Untamed palette looks like. It's a little bit deeper than I typically like to go, which is why I selected this one. I've been really enjoying the Sigma Enchanted the first couple of months of this year, and then the Sigma Corderosa, I really love that color story. It reminds me a lot of the Huda Coral Obsessions in that it's like this corally, peachy, just really warm palette, and I'm so excited to reach for it in the summertime. So ultimately I landed on this one needing to be the one that I would declutter, but I still really enjoy this palette and I still think it's a nice one. So I'm glad this isn't a real thing where I have to actually declutter all of these palettes at the end of this video. Okay, I feel like I hopefully fixed my lighting a little bit so it doesn't actually look so sunsetty. Hopefully I haven't moved too much in terms of frame, but my battery died, so I had to swap that out. Anyway, for Alter Ego, this one was a tough one. I only own 2 palettes from Alter Ego. I own the Canyon as well as the Artemis, and I love both of them, but ultimately I decided if I had to declutter one, I would go with the Canyon palette, and the reason is that this just offers a little less variety than the Alter Ego Artemis. The Alter Ego Artemis offers like the greens and the teals and the blues alongside a lot of neutral shades, whereas this one's just like a really warm, neutral, sort of sultry palette. I love both of them. I don't want to declutter this one, but if I had to choose between the two, this is the one that I would go with. Next up is Nars. I only own 2 palettes from Nars, and this one was super easy because I love my Nars Summer Solstice palette. So if I had to declutter one, I would go with the Nars Climax palette. Now, I did really enjoy this palette, although I will say it takes a little bit more time to blend this one and to work with this one. The shades are a little bit deeper, but I absolutely love all of the foiled shades in this. It's the mattes that I don't absolutely love the performance of the mattes, but the shimmers I think are gorgeous and outstanding. I would be sad to declutter this one, don't get me wrong, but if I had to choose between this and the Summer Solstice, this would be the one that's gotta go. Pat McGrath was another easy one. I knew right away which Pat McGrath palette I would declutter if I had to declutter one, and it is the Divine Rose Luxe Quad in Eternal Eden. This is what this one looks like. This just is like not my jam. Like honestly, I could see myself decluttering this one come my next declutter. The only reason I leave this one in here is for this like beautiful purple shimmer, but like honestly, do I really need to keep it around for this? I would be curious. I want to see something quick. Okay, like this is the reason I keep the Pat McGrath around, but like honestly, no, it's not gonna be, okay, it's not gonna be a spot on dupe at all. Okay, I was swatching it alongside a couple of shades. Yeah, it's not at all. Ugh, why do I like love, I swatched it alongside a couple shades in the Natasha Denona Lila palette, but it's not even close. Why am I like loving this shade now? I was like, oh, maybe I can actually declutter this. Maybe someday down the road. But like the 2 matte shades, like this matte shade I like, but this is just not a shade that I reach for all that frequently. And then this shade is fine, but truly for the like $65, I just felt like, now I'm like, okay, that's actually really pretty. I don't know what this would still be the one I would declutter from Pat McGrath if I had to declutter one. I'm not gonna declutter my expensive $125 palettes. No, 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 no. So it's between this quad and I think I have 3 or 4 other quads, but it was an easy pick for Pat McGrath. All right, next up we have Kaleidos, and I love all of my Kaleidos palettes, but this was an easier pick. If I had to declutter one today, it would be the Lunar Lavender palette, and the reason for this is these shades are just not shades I feel like I would miss all that much. These 2 shades are really the reason I love this palette, especially like, oh my gosh. But I just don't do like purple looks. Oh my gosh, okay. I feel like I need to, since I'm not actually decluttering this, I need to pull this out and create a look with this because hot dog, that is such a pretty shade. Really the only reason that I care to keep this palette around. I do kind of just want to swatch the other. There are the 2 shimmers swatched. Really beautiful, especially that one right there, which is really the reason I bought the palette and really the reason I keep this palette around. I do like this shade right here for a one shadow and done sort of look too, but if this palette was gone, I don't feel like I would miss it too much, which is why I would choose this one from Kaleidos if I had to choose one to declutter. Next up I have Tarte, and I do really enjoy the Tarte palettes I still own in my collection, but if I had to choose one, I didn't want to choose the Unleashed palette, so I had to go with my Tarte Love Trust and Fairy Dust palette, which is very loved. It's gotten a lot of use for me. I love the color, the color story. I like the quality. It's a limited edition palette though, and it's getting older in my collection. So also I cannot stand round packaged palettes, like, because you can't stand them up then either. Like, it's just like, in terms of like keeping things organized, I can't stand a round eyeshadow palette. So that would be another reason I would declutter this. And then speaking of round eyeshadow palettes, my selection for Glamlite, if I had to declutter one, was the Strawberry Pie palette, or the Pie palette. I felt like of all my Glamlite palettes, this color story was the least interesting to me. I still enjoy this palette, I still like it, but I love all my other Glamlite palettes, so this was an easy choice for me. Also, there's the whole round packaging sort of thing, so it was an easy choice. Ooh, let's do ABH. I have decluttered a number of ABH palettes over the years, and eventually I'm sure I'll declutter more. And if I had to declutter one of my ABH palettes in my collection right now, it probably should be the ABH Mario palette, because that palette is so old, but it would have to be the ABH Carly palette. I just didn't find that this color story was that interesting. I probably shouldn't have purchased this in the first place, but I felt inclined to at the time. I do have 3 eyeshadow pans in this palette, and I do feel like I could have some fun with the top row, and honestly even like these 2 shades out here, but it's just not a palette I look into and get inspired at all. Like, I look into this and I'm like, meh, okay, like what am I really gonna do with this? So if I had to declutter one from ABH, it would be the Carly palette. My choice from Urban Decay was not hard at all, and it is the newest release. It's the Urban Decay Wild Greens. Man, was I disappointed in the quality of this eyeshadow palette. I was so excited for this. I can't remember if I told this story. I cannot remember if I told this story when I was talking about this in the like ranking the new to be palettes, but I was driving home from work one day and I was talking on the phone, I think to my mom, and I was like passing the Ulta, because I passed an Ulta to get home, and I remember, I couldn't remember if Ulta closed at 7 or 8, but it was like 6:48 p.m. And I was like, hold on, Mom, I need to check when Ulta closes, because I really need to get the Urban Decay Wild Greens palette and hopefully the NARS foundation. And it was like a last minute decision, so I like swerved in really quick to the lot, and sure enough they closed at 7. So I like ran in there with like 12 minutes till they closed, and I couldn't find the palette right away, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're not even gonna have the Urban Decay Wild Greens. And they did have my NARS foundation in the shade that I wanted, because they were sold out online, but then I found the palette at the very front of the store. And that's my story about how this came into my life. I was so excited about it, and then I was so let down by the quality. I just felt like the mattes were like not pigmented. Like this shade right here I was really excited for, but it like really blends away into nothing. There's a lot of kick up for not a lot of pigment payoff, and I just feel like the textures of the shimmer shades, like they just are like very lackluster on the eyes, and I was super disappointed in this palette. So if I had to declutter one from Urban Decay, it would be my newest one. From Rowan, I own 2 of their quads, and this one was really tough, but I've just been living for the shades in the 1111 quad, so I had to go with the 75 degrees quad if I had to choose one to declutter, which is crazy because color story wise, this is the palette that would probably get more use, but in terms of like just like a special aspect to it, there's something special, more special about the 1111 quad to me. I think the textures are so unique throughout both. I love both of these quads, but truly if I could only keep one, it would be the 1111, meaning I would have to declutter the 75 degrees. Another difficult decision for me was Dose of Colors, but I had to go with Sassy Siennas because I couldn't get rid of my Friendcation or my Baked Browns. Sassy Siennas I still really enjoy, and I very much look forward to pulling this out for the spring summertime, but I had to make a decision, so it had to be Sassy Siennas. Sorry. Next up we have Juvia's Place, and I will not lie, I'm not like the biggest fan of the Juvia's eyeshadow formula, and now there's like a ton of drama surrounding Juvia's Place, so I kind of just like want to stay away from talking about Juvia's Place in general. But if I had to choose one to declutter from them, I went with the mauves. I don't own a ton of Juvia's palettes anymore, and this mauve color story just doesn't speak to me on a level that would make me want to keep this. Like I could see myself decluttering this. Like if I lost this today, I wouldn't even be that mad. So why do I still have it in my collection? Because I'm really bad at decluttering. Aether Beauty was a tough one for me. I actually recently accumulated 2 more Aether Beauty palettes, and I decided to go with the Aether Beauty Amethyst palette for the one I would declutter. The reason for this is just a deeper palette and a deeper color story that I see myself reaching for. Like, I see myself reaching for all the other three that I own much more than this one, just because those ones are a little bit lighter, a little bit easier for like everyday quick eyeshadow palette use. Just like I'm thinking about like work appropriate looks. Not that you can't make work appropriate looks out of really anything. I mean, depending where you work, but because this one's a little bit deeper, I just could see myself using this one the least of all of them, so I went with this one for my choice to declutter. I don't own a ton from Too Faced right now, but if I had to declutter one, I would go with my Too Faced Palm Springs Dreams palette. This is currently going in my palettes on their last 2 Raw series, and it's a palette I could definitely see myself decluttering at the end of the year. I do have a pan in this palette, but this palette just doesn't really excite me all that much. Like, it's just like, meh, it's there, and I don't really care to really use it or have it in my collection, so why am I keeping this around? I don't know. Maybe I'll declutter this sooner rather than later. Odin's Eye was a tough one for me because I love Odin's Eye. I love every eyeshadow palette that I have owned / tried from them. I don't own everything, but pretty close. So the one that I decided to go with if I had to declutter one, but I'd still be sad about it, is the Verdandi mini eyeshadow palette. Looks like this, and the reason being is I just could see myself getting the least use out of this color story comparatively to all my other palettes, and the reason is because this only has 6 shades. You have obviously 5 pans, but this one's a split pan, and I just don't reach for reds all that often, and really like shades like this coral, like salmon sort of shade aren't shades that I reach for all that frequently either. I would be really sad to get rid of these 2 shades. I love both of them, but if I had to declutter one from Odin's Eye, it had to be this one. From Persona, I believe I'm saying the same that I have said in the past. If I had to declutter one, it would be the Persona Identity 2. I just love the Identity one way too much to get rid of it. I get so much use out of that one, especially because it is more neutral, and on a day-to-day basis I typically go more neutral rather than colorful. I still absolutely love and adore the Persona Identity 2. I would recommend this one, but ultimately if I had to declutter one, it would have to be the Identity 2. We're down to 3 left. So for Melt Cosmetics, this was tough because I do really enjoy my Melt eyeshadow formula. Because I do really enjoy my Melt eyeshadow palettes. I do think Melt has a formula that takes a little bit more patience and a little bit more time and a little bit more blending, but the end result, I do love majority of my Melt Cosmetics eyeshadow palettes. I had to go with the Melt Cheese and Parties. Now, I do love purple looks, don't get me wrong, but this one again is just a little bit deeper, and a lot of these, I've noticed myself throughout this saying like things like this is a little bit deeper, and sometimes I just get nervous about the palettes that go really deep or that are the majority really deep shades, just because I am not a blending master. I have hooded eyes that I just cannot seem to figure out how to like best create looks with, so things can get messy and things can get a little bit wacky and a little bit wonky pretty quickly. So I am really intimidated by like shades like the latter half or this half of the palette. And I also just love the like earthy rustic tones in my Melt Gemini and my Melt Rust palette. Even though the Melt Smoke Session palette is has some dud shades and is a little bit more difficult to work with, I still love the looks that I create with that palette. So this is the palette that intimidates me the most from Melt, and if I had to declutter one, it would be this one. From Artist Couture, I love me some Artist Couture eyeshadow. So this one was easy because I already own some of these shades in my larger palette, but I went with the Artist Couture Supreme Nudes The Quickie. This has a couple of repeat shades from the Supreme Nudes eyeshadow palette, and a couple of new shades, but it has less shades than both of my other 2, and I love all 3, so it was a pretty easy choice. This is one that would be really nice for travel, but due to the way that the packaging is on all of the Artist Couture eyeshadow palettes, I'm like, what am I trying to say? The packaging is super sleek, and honestly I would be just fine traveling with like the regular size one because it's not too much bigger, and it's super sleek and thin, so it wasn't a tough choice. I already own most of these shades in my Artist Couture Supreme Nudes, so if I had to declutter one, it would be the Quickie, because I'd rather the full thing over just a Quickie. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I mean, sometimes a quickie is good too though. All right, and then the final brand is Nabla Cosmetics. You guys know I love Nabla Cosmetics. I'm literally obsessed with them, like literally obsessed with the brand. So this was tough because I really do love all of my Nabla eyeshadow palettes, but the one that inspires me the least is my Dreamy 1. Now my Dreamy 2 I absolutely love, even though I cannot find that palette. I have no idea where it is and it's making me really sad. Like, do I need to order another Dreamy 2? Because it feels like I need to. Here is the Dreamy 1. It looks like so pretty, but when I start to like look and like start to create a look with this, I feel like the matte shades just don't work in the way that I want them to. I mean, I guess these two, I just like, I wish these two pink shades weren't in here. I mean, maybe even I would keep this, but I just wish this shade was something different. I don't necessarily know what, but for some reason this pink shade throws me off. I still think the formula in this palette is beautiful. I love that Nabla has a range of textures. It's not just like a matte and a shimmer. They have a range of textures throughout their palettes. The formula is really good. I had to make a choice, and there was a lot of Nabla palettes to choose from, but ultimately this one inspires me the least, and this one is the one that I get the least excited to reach for. So if I had to declutter one from Nabla, it would be such a sad day, but it would be the Dreamy 2, or the Dreamy, just the original Dreamy. After that wraps it up for all of the palettes that I own more than one from, and which palette I would declutter if I had to declutter one from each brand. I would love to know, do you disagree with anything? Were you like shouting at your screen like, girlfriend, why would you declutter that? I'm sure some of you are thinking to yourselves, girlfriend, like, why don't you just declutter some of those? Because like clearly you don't seem to care if they're in your collection. So maybe you'll see these in a future eyeshadow palette declutter video, but that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. I hope that you guys are enjoying palette week. If you have any palette themed content you would like to see from me, please leave me a comment below. I love getting your guys' feedback and ideas for new palette content. Other than that, thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.